Sure, you've been a woodworker for a couple years, or maybe 20, and you are still applying finish by hand? Why? Hello, my name's Roger Kugler. This is Working at Woodworking Podcast. My goal is to get you out of the hobby mode and into the professional mode, starting to serve your community with your talents and skills and making some money while you're doing it. Today we're going to talk about to spray or not to spray. And my goal in this episode is to get you to drop the paintbrush and pick up a spray gun. I recently did not make a survey online where I asked woodworkers if they spray or if they don't, and of those who do not spray, why not? These were some of the responses that I, made up. Number one, spray equipment is too expensive. Another one, I'm just about as fast doing it by hand. And one of my all-time favorites, it takes so long to clean up. It's just faster to do it by hand. And one that a lot of people, myself included, use is, I don't have a big fancy spray booth. There was a couple of people who wanted to sound good, and they said, I don't know enough about it to make an informed decision. Yeah, right. And my all-time favorite is, it scares me. I have said every one of these things to myself. I fought the spray bug for years, decades, and I finally bit the bullet and I got into it, and I want to share some of my experience with you, and hopefully you can pick up the spray gun. So I'm going to break spray finishing down into 4 different types. We're going to start off super simple, super easy, and work ourselves up to more of a high volume professional setup. You can jump in at any one of these 4 steps, whatever you feel comfortable at. So if you're not spraying any type of finish right now, I think step number 1 is the perfect place to start. Rattle cans or spray cans. They're called rattle cans because you have that little metal ball in there that when you shake it up, it breaks loose and starts to agitate all of the solids inside the can to get it to mix with the liquid, the carriers, and it produces a really nice finish. If you're using a rattle can, read the directions. If it says to vigorously shake it for 2 minutes, you vigorously shake it for 2 minutes. Don't give it 30 seconds and then complain that the thing doesn't work and the finish sucks. No, you really do need to pay attention here. Rattle cans have come a long way. They used to be, just kind of cheap and quick and easy and with not so great finish. But if you're buying quality rattle can paint or finish, you can get an incredibly good job with these. Now, there's the cheap rattle cans and there's the more expensive, higher quality professional style. We'll talk about that in a few minutes. One of the great things about rattle cans, you can use them just about any place. You don't need that big fancy spray booth. You can take them into your backyard and set a piece of furniture on a tarp and just start spraying away. You do want to be a little cognizant of the overspray and the wind direction. If you are in a tight little development where your neighbor's BMW is just a couple feet away, well, you might need to do something else there. There's a stain on part of our siding where I was doing a fence panel and wasn't really paying as much attention as I should have. And if you look really close, there's these little brown specks where I kind of oversprayed and got the siding. So do pay attention to that. And if you complain that the little nozzle is too hard on your index finger, well, they make these great little plastic triggers that just snap onto the rattle can, and it gives you a full paddle style trigger that you can squeeze. It depresses the nozzle, and you can get great results out of these. What can you spray? Just about anything. A varnish, a lacquer, shellac, and paint. Now, the nice thing about paint is that virtually all of what you're going to be spraying is an oil-based paint, a really good, high-quality paint. If you go to a paint store and tell them that you need paint for an end table, they're going to give you latex. Even if you argue with them, they're going to give you latex. And quite frankly, latex sucks. But if you pick up a can of spray paint, now you've got something that's actually going to work. It's going to get hard. It's going to last for decades, and it's going to look nice. Maybe you want to spray lacquer. This is something that is kind of hard to do inside of a shop because the stuff just absolutely stinks to high heavens. But if you get it in a spray can, boom, you can take that outside and spray to your heart's content. Last week we talked about furniture repair as a business. This ties right in. If you're doing furniture repair, and I strongly advise you to investigate Mohawk aerosol finishing products. There's a link in the show notes. You can pick up a can of pre-catalyzed lacquer on Amazon for like $20. And what I really like them for is you can get different tinted lacquers. And these are really good as toners to kind of blend a finish in, maybe the finish on a new repair into the old finish. It works out really, really well. Mohawk is producing really high quality, professional grade rattle cans, and the stuff works incredibly well. Check that out. Cost, like I said, $20 for a can of this. No, you're not going to do an entire dining room table with it, and it wouldn't be terribly cost effective to do that, although you could. But for simple little repairs, maybe an end table, yeah, it's going to cover that. And if you're spraying shellac, you can pick that up at the hardware store. It does a good job. Takes a while to dry as opposed to if you're mixing up your own shellac, but it's still a pretty darn good product. I have used the polyurethane spray finishes for a lot of projects and have been very happy with it. It's very fast. There's really the only setup is shaking the can and finding that trigger, setting up a little, backdrop so that you're not spraying all over the place. And it's really the simplest way you can go. Cleanup, super easy. Just read the directions on the can. Some of them you turn upside down and spray for 15 seconds. Some of them you don't. There's really no need for a big spray booth. So check that out. That is the easiest way to get into spray. And it gives you a perfect opportunity to learn spray technique. You're just not pointing at the end table and pulling the trigger. There's a little bit more to that. But we're not going to go into actual technique in this episode. But with a rattle can, you can practice good technique so that if you move up to something in the future, you already have that down. The number 2 way of getting into spray finishes is to go out and buy an airbrush. Yes, that's right, an airbrush. You can go to Harbor Freight and pick these things up for like $10. Menards, Lowe's, Hobby Lobby. And I'm not talking about the high-end Pache, things like that. I'm talking about the Super El Cheapo airbrush. You probably have an air compressor in your shop if you're using pneumatic nailers. This will work on that. Typically, your pneumatic nailer is running at 90, maybe 100 psi. For these El Cheapo airbrushes, you're going to want to dial that down. Depending on your brush and the finish, maybe 20 psi, maybe 40 psi. You have to kind of experiment a little bit. But you already have that equipment. And a $15 airbrush is not a huge investment to start experimenting and start practicing. I have one product that I've made for, decades that I got really tired of hand finishing. I was using shellac, and there's got to be a better way. And I was at an auction and I bought a tray of tools, and it had this little airbrush in it. It's like, let's give this a try. I went years finishing that product with a little airbrush. It's not a very large product, and the airbrush did a really, really good job. Again, I wouldn't want to, do a dining room table with an airbrush, but, if I had 1 or 2 chairs to finish, I would do it. Because you don't need that big of a pattern to do something like that if you're getting into the individual spindles. It fits just perfect. If you get a large cardboard box, set that on your workbench, get a box fan and a furnace filter, tape the furnace filter to the box fan, set it beside your cardboard box, there's your spray booth. We're not putting out that much material that a simple box fan is not going to be able to handle it. It's going to do a decent job. Cleanup couldn't be simpler. Simply empty out any unused finish from the airbrush, add the thinner back into it. If you're using shellac, that's just alcohol, and spray a few seconds through there into some wadded up paper towels or cotton rags and wipe everything down really good. Boom, you're done. You don't really need to take everything apart and disassemble it and clean everything every time you do it. Now, if you go to lunch and come back 2 hours later, you might need to take everything apart and let them soak in a solvent for a few minutes, clean them, and then reassemble them. But day-to-day operation, no, that's all you need to do. Very simple, very easy. All right, the rattle can and the airbrush is pretty low-tech stuff. Let's just take a little step up into number 3, the El Cheapo HVLP. And what I mean by El Cheapo, $150, maybe $350, right in that price range. You'll see these at Rockler. They have their own brand. Erlex is a company out of England who is very popular in the U.S. They're also sold by Rockler. These are simple little HVLP units. They're not terribly powerful, which is good because they're $150, $300. Do they do a good job? Yeah, they do a very decent job. I mean, you're probably not going to be painting your corporate Learjet with them, but if you had a dining room table, by all means you could use this. And did I mention these are like $200-$300? Now here is where the speed really starts to pick up with your finishing. These are going to put out a lot more material, and you can do that dining room table in just the fraction of the time you would do it by hand. I'm going to roughly say pretty much a guaranteed 75% reduction, and that might even go up to 90% reduction. I remember I have lost money on several jobs because I underestimated how long it was going to take me to finish by hand. But with an HVLP sprayer, it makes you money. It's that simple. It's going to make you money. These El Cheapo units, are they worth it? If you're a little leery about getting into HVLP spraying, yes, I think they are, because they will get you over that hump. They will get a gun in your hand, and you will get into the technique. Will you buy a more expensive, higher quality outfit in the future? Yeah, that's a real possibility, and we're going to talk about that in just a moment. What about cleanup with these things? You now have a tank that you need to clean your finish out of. For me, spraying shellac, that just means I pour the shellac out, I pour some alcohol in, put the lid on, swoosh it around real good, and dump that out after I have sprayed some of that finish through the gun, to clean out the inner workings, and then wipe everything down. I mean, I maybe spend 5 minutes cleaning up after a spray job. I mean, you can't clean a good quality badger hair brush in that time. In fact, I will say it takes as long to clean a spray gun as it does a quality paintbrush. So number 4, a high quality HVLP spray gun. Here we're talking about the Fujis and the Apollos, and there's several other on the market. These are the ones that are going to cost you, I'd say $750 to maybe $1,500. This is a chunk of change. And I can understand if you've never done this before and you're really leery about dropping $800 on something that you don't know very much about. That's why those El Cheapos is not a bad idea. I mean, I wish I had done the El Cheapo 10 years ago. I didn't. I was using my rattle cans and my airbrush. Those were working for me, but I just wanted something a little bigger, a little faster, and I finally took a jump into the Fujis. And I am really, really glad I did. But honestly, had I done the El Cheapo 10 years ago, I would have bought the Fuji probably 7 years ago, maybe 8 years ago, because I would have been more comfortable with it. So that might be the situation you're in. Think about it. Speed, very fast. These units can put out a lot of material very quickly. That is very high quality. Now, one thing with the other methods, even the rattle cans, sometimes the finish is not perfect. There's little nibs, there's maybe a little roughness to it, and you end up having to do a little bit of work. I've had finishes coming off the Fuji spray gun that is customer ready. Cleanup on the high quality unit is the same as the El Cheapo. I'm saying about 5 minutes. Now, when you are starting to shop for these high quality units, it can get very confusing very fast. There's 2 things to consider. The number of turbine stages. Now, the way these things operate is that they put out a high volume of material at a very low pressure, hence HVLP. All of this started in California a couple decades ago. California, particularly in the metro areas, have always had a real problem with air quality. And they have been very aggressive in trying to improve that air quality. And one of the things they looked at was the spray finish industry. Now, back then, everybody was using a low volume, high pressure spray outfit. These were those metal guns that you had to get dressed up in a hazmat suit and you walked into a spray booth and started spraying, and there was this immediate cloud of material, and you had to wear goggles, else your eyes started to get encrusted in whatever you were spraying. That is a high pressure. They are throwing that stuff out of the gun so fast under such high pressure, it hits the object that you're spraying and bounces back up into the air. Now, the real problem with this is, number one, it's incredibly wasteful of material because you're putting more into the atmosphere than you're actually putting on the product. And 2, you get this sandy, gritty overspray in your finished product. And that's where the spray booth comes in. With the high volume, low pressure, you're avoiding 90% of that overspray. You can control exactly how much material is coming out of that gun. If you're getting bounce back, overspray, you dial your materials adjustment down. You may also dial down your airflow to control that. You can really control the amount of overspray that you're getting. So if you're particularly older and you remember those old conventional spray guns, this is not that. You could set up an HVLP in a corner of your shop and spray a dining room chair, and you're not going to cover your entire shop with this overspray. They are so very, very good. So when you're looking at these HVLP guns, you're looking at the turbines. In essence, this is a big vacuum cleaner set on blow. And the vacuum cleaner has a number of different fans inside called stages. A 1 or 2 stage turbine is what you'll find on the El Cheapo styles, like the Erlex or the Rockler model. They're not putting out very much air at very high pressure. High pressure, I'm talking about like maybe 5 psi, as opposed to a conventional gun that might be putting stuff out at 60, 70, 80 psi, depending on how much air pressure it takes to atomize the finish that they're blowing. These higher quality HVLPs, the Fujis, the Apollos, they are typically a 3, 4, or 5 stage. You can decide what stage HVLP outfit you want to buy. A 3-stage does a really good job for most people. It's kind of right there between the hobbyist and the professional model. A 4-stage is definitely a little more into the professional model. Someone who's going to be using this fairly often and wants to spray a wider variety of material. You're not going to get a real good finish with a 1 or 2 stage if you're blowing something like a latex paint. It just doesn't have the power to get a good atomization. Sure, you can water the stuff down, but now you're starting to affect the quality of the paint. Where a 4 or 5 stage, that's what these are made for. And you just get a much better finish. Also, they're just simply built for a longer duty cycle. The other term you'll hear is bleeder or non-bleeder. We're not talking about hemophiliacs here. So the problem with the bleeder, when you release the trigger, the material stops, but the air doesn't. And it's so very easy to blow dust into the finish that you just got done applying. So for that reason, most people really prefer a non-bleeder gun in which you release the trigger and the material stops as well as the air. Generally, they're just much easier to live with. Sorry for the break. I just need to try to pay some bills. I have recently signed up to become an affiliate with Skillshare.com. I don't know if you've heard of these folks. It is an online learning platform. I have been a member of Skillshare for, half a dozen years or so, but I would really encourage you to check them out. If you're just kind of getting your business off the ground, you're struggling with, coming up with a logo, Skillshare has classes on how to design your own logo. And these aren't like 6-month semesters. These are like 45-minute lessons, maybe an hour and a half lesson. They're very short, they're very condensed, they're video, and you can really learn a lot in a very short period of time. I've used Skillshare and have studied a lot of web design, HTML, CSS, responsive design, along with some fun classes like how to sew your own leather jacket. They have everything. Photography, if you need a little help there, they have dozens and dozens of classes. You hear me talk about spreadsheets all the time. If you don't know how to use spreadsheets, take a class on Skillshare. It costs me $99 a year, but you can sign up for a free trial. I believe it's a 7-day trial. Very well worth it. Give it a shot. There's a link in the show notes with a discount code that will save you 30% when you sign up using that link. Okay, let's talk about spray booths. This is the stumbling block for a lot of people, myself included, for many, many years. I thought that you had to have this big, elaborate, and expensive spray booth to do any finishing in your shop. And a lot depends on what you're spraying. We can break finishes down into two categories: volatile finishes and non-volatile finishes. A volatile finish is something like a lacquer, a varnish, conversion varnish, shellac, oil-based paints, things that have a lot of VOCs, a lot of chemicals in them that can go boom. A non-volatile finish would be waterborne finishes. Any of your waterborne, polyurethanes and varnishes, your latex paint, your acrylic paints, your milk paints are all a waterborne finish, and they tend not to explode. So when we're talking about spray booths, which one are you going to be spraying? If you're staying with water-based finish, about 90% of everything else I'm going to talk about here in the next few minutes doesn't apply to you. If you do want to spray volatile finishes, you need to do a little bit more homework and be a little bit more careful. Now, go into any woodworkers forum and mention spray booth explosions, and I'll tell you, it's going to be a real flashpoint. Sorry. There's a lot of information and misinformation out there about spray booth explosions. I am not an expert at this. What I have determined in my own research and for myself is it's rather hard to blow yourself up in a garage workshop. I mean, you could do it, but you're probably going to have to work fairly hard at it. Again, if anyone blows themselves up, don't start blaming me on this, but do your research. It's sometimes it's not what it appears to be. When we're using volatile organic chemicals, we want to reduce that explosion risk as low as possible. And what will happen is if you get a spark combined with these VOCs, you have the potential for an explosion. So we don't want a spark and VOCs to come together. If you're using an exhaust fan that has like a universal motor on it, with brushes and contacts, you have a spark generator. You start sucking a whole bunch of VOC-laden air through that, and you create the potential for an explosion. The big professional spray booths eliminate this risk by eliminating the spark. They are using fans that have a totally enclosed, sealed motor. No way the air can get to the VOCs. There are some systems that remove the motor from the airstream altogether using some type of a belt drive. You're driving a fan in the airstream via belts to a motor that is connected outside of the actual airstream. So you avoid it that way. But there are all kinds of ways that you can set up a spray booth in your shop to spray finishes safely. One of the first things I'd like you to do is check your local ordinances. There may be a regulation someplace that you cannot do this, especially if you're in a HOA. If that's not a problem, your spray booth does not have to be real fancy. It can literally be a box fan with an air filter strapped over it for like waterborne finishes. Just go to YouTube and you can find all kinds of different ways to set this up. Some people will set up a track system in their shop with curtains that they can, cordon off a corner of their shop. They have an exhaust fan. That works real well for some people. There's a company called Paint Line that makes a portable job site spray booth. It's basically a little frame, plastic covered frame that you set up, and it has a an exhaust fan hooked up with ducting that does a marvelous job of creating a portable spray booth. These were designed for painters who were doing like kitchen cabinets and things like that in maybe new construction homes or even residential homes where they need a spray booth on site, but it needs to be portable. These things do a fantastic job. A little pricey, $600-700, but that could be a very good investment. So with a little bit of ingenuity, you can come up with something. Bob Flexer, in one of his articles, showed how to simply raise the garage door like 2 or 3 feet, put a couple box fans under the door, and fill in the remaining area with cardboard. Put down a canvas drop cloth on the floor in front of the fans. Boom. Spray booth. Set your dining room tables on there that you're refinishing, maybe the dining room table, and problem solved. It doesn't have to be all that elaborate. Again, anytime you're doing something like this, be aware of where your exhaust is going. Something I had threatened to do for years but never actually did was to buy an easy up canopy. These are little 10 by 10 canopies that you can use for like picnics or craft shows. Get the ones with the 4 sides included. Set up some type of a fan on there. You have a little outdoor or indoor, if your shop's big enough, a spray booth that you can put up and you can take down. So don't let the lack of a big elaborate spray booth in your shop prevent you from finishing. Don't overthink this. It's actually simpler than what you think it is. What I have done in my shop with my HVLP outfit is I have a curtain that I draw that closes off one little area of my shop, and I bought a fan, about a 400 CFM fan from, I think, Industrial Supply, that has a totally enclosed sealed motor. And I put that in my back door. What, you expected me to cut a hole in the wall of my shop so that if we ever sell this place, I have to kind of patch that hole? It's easier to replace a door than it is to patch siding. So yeah, I just cut the 14-inch hole in the lower portion of the door and built a box that contains the fan and a filter, and there it is. It works fantastic. Very pleased with it. Again, you don't have to be real elaborate with this. The only thing you need to do is to move air outside. One final thing. Are you finishing your finish? Mark Adams gave a lecture several years ago, probably 20 years ago, where he was talking about finishing your finish. And it really opened my eyes up into how to get an absolutely perfect, glossy, smooth finish. After you get done applying your finish, by hand, by rag, by brush, by spray, go over that with the appropriate sandpaper and polish out the finish. So if you're kind of thinking about, I'd really love to have $1,000, Apollo spray outfit, but I can't really afford that, think about one of the El Cheapo HVLP. And if it doesn't give an absolutely perfect finish for you, you're going to finish the finish anyway, so it doesn't matter that much. But the important thing is that you are able to apply that finish quickly in a few minutes instead of a few hours. So how'd I do? Have I convinced you? I think I answered all the questions about the cost and the speed and the cleanup, and I hope I've provided you with enough information that you could make a decision on this. And I also hope that maybe I have made this subject seem a little less scary. I know I wrestled with it for years, and I finally figured out that this isn't rocket science. You can use a shaker can, you can use an airbrush, you can get an El Cheapo HVLP, or you can spend the money and get a really nice high quality HVLP spray system. What about those guns you hook up to your air compressor? Well, I was trying to make this episode simple, so I didn't really go into that. Yeah, you can do that. You need a big air compressor to do that. And a lot of woodworkers, especially if, you're working out of your basement or your garage or something, just don't have that big of an air compressor. So I'm not going to go into that. If you do have a big compressor, explore that. That could be a route for you. Recommendations for the week: YouTube. There is a lot of stuff on YouTube. Charles Neal would be a really good place to start. I mentioned him a couple podcasts ago. And when you're looking at YouTube videos about finishing, they're kind of broken up into 3 different categories. You have your wood finishing, your clear finishes, and then there's a lot of videos on auto body painting. And some of those are incredibly worth watching. And there's also the house painting spray videos. And that is an entirely different genre of how they're doing things. I did find one video that I thought was very useful. You may also, particularly if you're in the furniture side of things, the furniture repair, and that is spray finish wood furniture using aerosol lacquer. Product reviews and techniques. It's a video about using the Mohawk aerosol lacquers and products. Very good. There's a link in the show notes to that. Missed jobs. I got an email. A gentleman has 100 board feet of pine that came from a tree that his daughter had planted 35 years ago. The tree had to come down. He had it milled out, but it needs to be planed and something made from it, maybe a bookcase. Good luck with that project. I'm not able to help you with that right now, and I honestly don't know anyone who has capacity that could help you likewise. Hence, this show trying to get more people into this profession. So I do hope you found this helpful and useful. I do hope you explore spray finishing. If it really terrifies you, pick up a can of spray paint. It's not just for graffiti anymore. If you've been itching to do this and you've been saving some money to make the investment, go ahead and pull that trigger. And get that high quality Apollo or Fuji spray outfit. I've left a link in the show notes to an Amazon page that does a pretty good job of profiling some of the different HVLP spray systems, and there's also a link down there for the Mohawk lacquer that I was talking about, as well as the portable spray booth. So anyway, until next week, happy woodworking.